So if you're interested in resumes, as all of you should, because all of you should need one, please give me your undivided attention.
You can divide it slightly if you want to.
Minimal.
Yeah. Okay. Are we live? Perfect. How's everybody doing? Let me start by this, asking a question. How many of you have spent time with me on your resume individually, or been to one of these talks before? Okay. A lot of you have seen this before. How many of you took SWN 99 already? Everybody? So SWN 99 is a class. Essentially, I think it's a 0 credit class, but you're essentially preparing for your co-ops, and it's taught by our co-op coordinator, advisor person, who changes every year. And sometimes they do invite individuals such as myself to do guest lectures. So it's possible that some of the things you're hearing now, you've heard before, you'll hear again, but that's okay. I take kind of a slightly different angle, I think, than most people. One thing that what I'll tell you is I'm really passionate about connecting the real world, quote unquote, with technical folks who I consider to be my tribe. I consider you folks to be my tribe. Unless you commit a crime, then I don't know who you are, because my tribe doesn't commit crimes and they're not certainly not dumb enough to get caught, right? But essentially, like, I kind of grew up. My father was a programmer, and I started as a CS major actually, but I was always very interested in that connection between, the technical world and the real world. And now I will say the divide between those has narrowed quite a bit, right? Since I was young, since I was your age, partially because the technical world is kind of the real world now, right? When you think startup, you think, tech startup, right? And all the money is kind of on the West Coast, that sort of thing. But that has also contributed to my taking a career as a project manager, which was something that, I kind of flourished in. I was a PMP, and then also in moving into this career. And so I was really interested in kind of that connection, and I think this major, the software engineering major, represents that connection to a certain extent. I'm also very interested in helping students explore alternative careers that are not just coder, right? To some extent, that's what makes us different from computer science as a major. Though I'm not saying if you're not a software engineering major that this isn't for you, because the reality is what you major in college only slightly informs what you're going to do in your career, right? But I'm interested in this talk, in talking about how the engineering perspective, thinking about things as an engineer, how that affects our search. It gives us something of an advantage in terms of looking for a job, in terms of the way we interview and the way we craft our resume and think about elements of the resume. And my goal is, by the end of this, for you to have an understanding of that and to have some practical application of that within your resume and the way that you approach your job search, right? So I guess we'll get started. I'm actually going to go over a few different parts of the resume. Some of these slides have a fair number of animations, sometimes hundreds, but I thought it was kind of fun to be a PowerPoint ninja when putting this together. Let's hope that my Mac doesn't butcher these animations, which hasn't happened so far. So the first part of your resume that I want to talk about, and by the way, I have opinions about all of them, including your right from the top, the way you put your name and your contact information on there. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is skills. So how many people here have skills? Both have skills? Nunchuck skills? How many people here know what movie I was referring to just now? The one person. Appreciate that. Okay. By the way, I was referring to Napoleon Dynamite. the movie. And by the way, there was a short-lived animated series. If you really like the movie, the series absolutely nails it. Like, it's the same. It's the same voice actors. It feels the same. I don't know why it didn't do better, but that's beside the point. Okay, let's actually start by kind of putting together a picture, right? So here is some basic skills that a basic software engineer might have. And, you know, when freshmen come into me and they say, hey, professor, what skills do I put on my resume? The answer is very simple. Whatever you're using on your computer for work that your mom isn't, right? And I mean the generic your mom, not your mom might be like a brilliant software engineer, right? But I mean the your mom, like the one that all the other 10-year-old gamers are apparently sleeping with, right? That one. You know, the generic your mom. So like I say to them, hey, Microsoft Word, yeah, your mom's using that, right? Don't put that on your resume. It's kind of embarrassing for, you know, it's kind of, and if you're applying for a job as a administrative assistant, maybe, right? But we're in kind of software engineering. And so, you know, might kind of come up with your skills and you stick them right there on your resume, right? Now, what happens next? Well, guess what? As you continue along, as you kind of continue along, you gain more and more skills. And what's interesting about skills is that they also have skills that are related to them, right? So, for instance, if I asked you, okay, well, you have Java and C++ on your resume, and someone was looking for someone who can code in C#, what would you say? Would you say you know can do, bro, right? Or essentially, can you already program in C#? So what's interesting is when we look at the list of skills, we actually have skills that are also next to the skills. So we actually could expand this almost ad nauseum, or infinite, what's the, ad infinitum? So I can't say it. What? Ad infinitum, right? You could almost expand this essentially forever, right? So a lot of times what ends up happening is, well, obviously you're not going to fit all these on your resume. So people kind of start to make choices. And I would say most of these are reasonably unfortunate choices. So, for instance, you might just try to pick the ones that you consider maybe the sexiest or the most difficult to learn. And I would say this is one of those things that's kind of a bit of a trap, right? Just because you spent a long time learning something doesn't mean that it actually means something, right? How many people here, it took them a couple years to learn how to use the toilet, right? Should you put that on your resume? No, of course not. I mean, English took you a couple years, right? All of these things took you a few years. Now, oh, well, professor, my mom knows how to use the toilet, so that doesn't go on my resume. Yeah, that's true, right? But it does kind of illustrate a concept. It's like, well, this one was really hard, so I'm going to put it on there. But basically what I'm going to get to here is why that's kind of not really the engineering way. Let's look at some better options that we could use that are slightly better than this. One of them that we'll often see is kind of choosing things that are based on the actual job that we're applying for, right? That's actually slightly better because then at least you're kind of responding to what's there. Some people, they'll take a tack of, maybe looking for, they'll take a tack of maybe looking for groupings of skills. So, for instance, you might say, well, this particular set of skills clusters around project management, and this one clusters around usability. And so that's when you start to see some elements of kind of like maybe skill sets, right? Unfortunately, there can be some kind of assumptions that go with that as well that can lead to problems. And, what's interesting is one of the problems that people fear the most, right, is the problem of, the database that's searching for a search term, or the HR person who's non-technical, who's like, yeah, we need somebody that can program in C#, right? Those are issues that the solution I'm going to come up with, I'm going to show you, can kind of help with. But unfortunately, I think for some of that stuff, you kind of have to just say, you just kind of have to put it out of your mind. Because there's always going to be potential issues that come up that are kind of end up being edge cases, right? Because you have to remember, a software engineering company that's looking to hire software engineers should have at least some innate understanding of those issues, right? They typically cast a pretty wide net. Anyway, okay. Finally, I want to kind of clear these away, and I want to talk about the fundamental kind of problem with the way we think about skills. So I want you to imagine for a second that instead of a software engineer, you're a mechanic, right? You're a mechanic. You work on cars. Right now you're making a killing, right? Where on your resume would you put the word wrench skills? What do you think? Yeah.
Nowhere, because
it's
pretty obvious that you know how to use a wrench.
Well, I mean, it should be pretty obvious that you know how to program in Java, right? Interesting. Where you're using the wrench? Okay. Well, let me ask you this. First of all, there's a problem with specificity here, because this doesn't even say wrench skills, and this is what we do. We say, I have 13 millimeter wrench skills, right? And I also have 14 millimeter wrench skills and 12 millimeter wrench skills. Java, C++, C#, all the wrench skills, right? And did I mention I also have screwdriver skills, right? What are all of these things? Just like, what are all of you? What is this and what's that? If you had to categorize that, what would you call that? What?
Useless cogs in this.
Nope. Tools, just like you, right? So, sorry. See how I made that an insult? Yeah, okay. I've also insulted your mom. I'm basically bringing everybody into this. Okay, so here's the thing. If you imagine mechanic, right, it's hard to imagine mechanic putting the word wrench skills or screwdriver skills on their resume. Now, what would they put on their resume, right? Well, they might put brake diagnostics and repair, right? A lot of times people will say, well, the problem with wrenches is they're so common. Why would you bother? Well, so is brake diagnostics and repair. In fact, I think every mechanic does that. Like that's the most common thing to do on a car. In fact, I would actually recommend that you do that yourselves. It's that easy. It's very common. It's very typical. And one of these days, if you ever want me to argue why you should do your own brake jobs, I can get into that. But that's another conversation for another day. But if you ask your mechanic, okay, so what did you do with my brakes? And it could be as detailed as possible, right? They'll say, well, I looked at your brakes, and then I removed the caliper. Well, you're not being as detailed as possible, are you? Actually, okay, let me be more detailed. There were two 13 millimeter bolts, and I removed them. Okay, actually, you're not being detailed enough. Could you be more detailed? Two 13 millimeter bolts, and I had to use a 13 millimeter wrench. See how many progressions we had to get to even get to someone reasonably mentioning a tool. And yet we focus on these tools all the time, right? Kind of like tools. So let me actually kind of introduce the concept here, and that is essentially this. Skills are just tools. And if we think of them as being separate, if we think of them as being distinct, we run into problems. Now, where do you actually put that on the resume? I'm going to talk about that in a minute, but essentially, I want you to think about it like this. Do you know what a whitelist and a blacklist are? I promise you it's not racial, right? Okay, so a whitelist is essentially, actually, let's talk about whitelist. So the kind of club that I would go to has what's called a whitelist. That means you don't get in unless you're on the list. The kind of club that you schlubs will go to has a blacklist. You know, somebody got too drunk and broke a stool last week, so he can't come in anymore, right? And that's and you could imagine whitelists and blacklists used for things like file upload, right? We don't allow zips or executables, but anything else is fine. That's a blacklist. And a whitelist is just JPEG or GIF or GIF. That's right, all three. Okay. So basically what I'm saying is if you start whitelisting your skills, you're blacklisting everything else. That's a problem. You're saying, this is it. If it's not on this list, I can't do it, right? And once again, we're kind of talking about that kind of screening or secretary problem. Now, if you think about a mechanic, you should be thinking about your skills the same way a mechanic thinks about their tools. They don't put their tools first. They say, oh, I got a big toolbox in the back of the garage. There's tools in there I've never used because I might need to use them. And you do the same thing. I've never written an Objective-C, but I could figure it out. You have a reasonable confidence that you can because you've done Java and C# and, you know, whatever else, right? Thinking of them as tools also changes the way that you put them on your resume because it's no longer its own section, right? Because you run into that blacklist, whitelist problem. But let's move on to another section and we'll kind of bring it all together a little bit later. XP. I'm just using the terminology that you kids would use. You know, leveling up your XP tree, right? You've got your programming XP, you've got your sneaking and lockpicking and archery because you're a coward tree, right? And you're dual wielding because whatever. Okay. I'm going to tell another story. I want you to imagine that you're a freshman. Actually, you know what? That's not accurate. Imagine that you're a freshman, right? Okay, so you come in as a freshman and you have experience. There's your experience, right? You worked at Joe's Burger Barn. You were captain of the high school robotics team because it's non-athletic, and you volunteered at the middle-aged folks home. You call it the old folks home, but I'm older, so I think they're middle-aged now. Right? And, you know, it's simple. You come here, you might do a technical project, you make your first resume, bam. There we go, right? They all fit on there nicely. Continuing on. Now, we're not going to be a freshman anymore. Let's clear you right up. Oh, geez. You know what? Let me get that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so there we are. You figured that one out. Wash your pillowcase, folks, okay? It's that simple most of the time. Okay, so now we're adding some new skills. Maybe you get a job on campus. You do another project, a personal project. It's a little more crowded, but they still fit on there. You're coming to an inflection point, aren't you? You know what I mean when I say inflection point? You're trying to fill your resume, and now it just barely fits. You're playing with fonts and margins, you know. And then now you're going to get to the point where, well, guess what? We're throwing some more things on the heap, right? Maybe you're a hackathon that you participate in. By the way, I'm going to say props for WIC hacks coming up. Get involved. I'm excited. You were maybe in some sort of club as president. And finally, you got your first co-op. You're excited, right? I don't know why they hired you, but somehow you must have fooled them, right? We got a little problem here, don't we? Now, how do we solve this problem? Well, some of you come to incorrect conclusion. You know, I know what I'm going to do, right? I'm going to make the second page and it can deal with it. Right? Why is the second page a bad idea? Yeah.
Nobody has time to read all that.
Okay. That's true. Yeah.
They just might not see it.
Okay. Okay, it's possible.
More work to skim.
Okay.
You now have to stretch to fill out that second page.
Okay, yeah. Okay, you got to fill it up. Yep.
Maybe it's because you're making yourself seem less good
Oh, I like this. Yeah, your second tier soft skills. Maybe organization and prioritization are proven in the way you make your resume, right? What do you think?
People with more experience than you only have one page.
Exactly. Right? Think about it. Think about the situation. You're handing your resume to me. I'm the age of the people interviewing you, right? I've got my stuff on one page. This little shard's got a 2-pager. Who the heck do they think they are, right? Okay, so that's a bad idea. We're gonna get rid of that. We'll shred that right out there. And you know what? Let's get rid of your cockiness too. Okay? All native PowerPoint, by the way. You like that? Okay, so what do we do instead? Well, some people say, well, let's start getting rid of items. And it's hard. It's hard to get rid of items. Just toss some stuff in there. Let's get rid of that one, right? Oh, Jesus. You know, I swear I can make this. Let me try again. Oh, come on. Oh, jeez. You know what? Let's just put it in there. Get rid of it. Gone. Okay, so now we can fit it again, right? We're in a better position now, but where are we headed again? Guess what? More stuff's coming at us, right? Second co-op. This is quality. Part-time job. TA to class. Third co-op. We're in kind of a mess now, aren't we? Right? Essentially, we've got more experience. We've got things that we're not willing to give up. Right? And of course, you know, we do try things. Let's get rid of this stuff. Let's get rid of him too. All right? And so a lot of us will be like, we're going to do some extreme measures, right? We are going to take these elements. We're going to crush them down as much as we can, pushing the boundaries of both the eyes of the reader and the English language so that we can fit all of them onto our resume, right? And then we think, okay, we've done it. You know, finally, we got that thing down to one page. We've crushed all the margins. We're all set, right? We're good. There we go, right? Perfect. Oof. Once again, we've kind of gotten ourselves into some trouble. Let's get rid of this stuff. Okay, so how do we solve this problem? Well, let's bring both concepts that we've had together. First of all, I'm going to say this. You need to make choices. A resume is just as much, if not more, about what you don't put on there than what you do. And that actually has a lot of subtlety to it. It's as subtle as the B in subtle, right? So in other words, this idea that, okay, you know, anyone ever see a preview, right, for a movie? And you watch the whole preview and you see the end and you're like, I don't even need to watch the movie now. They literally took every funny moment and they put it in the preview. And I'm like, why would I watch this now, right? There is something to that in a resume. If you put everything in there, there's no, you know, they can make a decision without ever talking to you. Really, what a resume's job isn't to get you a job. It's to get you an interview. By the way, then it's yours to screw up. And we can talk about that some other time, right? So you need to put just enough in there so that they get a good flavor for who you are and they want to talk to you further. Now, there are some other mistakes that I see on resumes, right? And it's this happens maybe more early on than later. One of them is, this kind of relates to that like 2-pager thing. You are at an interesting time in your life. You are viewing the unlimited potential of yourself. You might have even had an experience where you overcame your imposter syndrome. You're at your physical peak. You're getting a good career. Like everything is coming up Millhouse for you folks, right? Anyone who gets that reference? Anyone who doesn't get the reference? Watch Simpsons. Simpsons has been around so long as a show that I was literally too young for the show when it came out. And it wasn't because like my parents were like, oh, you can't watch it. It was like I was in like Blue's Clues. Like wouldn't have even been like interesting to me. Like I would have been like, why would I watch this? That's how long Simpsons has been around. So essentially, it's easy to kind of get to this point where we see ourselves with this unlimited potential, and we kind of start expressing that in kind of weird ways on our resume. And part of this can come from desperation, from it's kind of a cognitive bias to some extent, but we kind of are like, I can do all the things, and I've said it so on my resume. And unfortunately, even if you can do all the things, and I believe in you, even more than your parents do. I'm here right now, they're not, okay? I'm just saying. Even if you can do all the things, no one's going to believe it, right? Who's this guy think he is? Thinks he can do all things. She thinks she can do all things. I've been trying to do all things for 20 years, right? Remember that you're interviewing with a person, right? A human, who probably was you 20 years ago, right? Okay, so what that means is you need to choose things. And I'm going to show you how to kind of choose the right things and how to express them properly. Okay, so let me ask you this question. What makes an engineer an engineer? I'll give you a hint. It's the same kind of answer as what makes an artist an artist, what makes a scientist a scientist, what makes a storyteller a storyteller. Anybody know? Yep. The engineering process. And when I say it's the same thing, I mean the same thing like the scientific method, the narrative structure, the artistic process, right? All these things are related to each other. I've fancied it up here. I added some fancy font here, right? I made it purple, which is traditionally the color of royalty. But the reality is, it's not that fancy. It's been around forever, and it's not that different from essentially the way humans work. The engineering process is essentially this. 1, define the problem. 2, design a solution. 3, implement and analyze it. Are there loops? Of course there's loops. Agile's all like, right? Waterfall's like, right? Like they all do their things the different way, but they all have these steps, and you could kind of expand these steps, right? You could say, well, defining the problem has like an elicitation period and requirements, whatever, right? But these are the 3 basic steps in the engineering process. Also, interestingly, the scientific method in storytelling. Essentially, this is how humans do things, right? Okay, so how do we actually define that? What does that actually mean? Well, typically, you would say a problem is a business need. And that's the way you define it. If you try to define it another way, you're not doing it right. And this applies to everything. The way you define your projects, because projects and experience, and this is what I would all call relevant experience, there's no distinction. And when I say defining a problem for, a class project, it shouldn't be the problem is I need an A, right? It should be something more like the customer needs something, right? This is what they need. Secondly, design a solution. In this case, I'm going to relate this a little bit to the job search, right? So if you think about let's say, I want you to imagine for a second that you are going to hire somebody new. You're not the employee, but the employer, right? And I would ask you a question. Why? Why do you need to hire somebody new? There's a business need. It's that simple. And by the way, need and opportunity, basically the same thing. Problems and opportunities are the same thing. So what's the very first thing you do? You design a solution. You write a requirements document, also known as a job description. Then, of course, you can follow along with that. How do you actually implement that? You hire somebody, and that means it's you, right? You're the one that's the implemented solution to that problem. Those are the 3 steps. The problem. Now, how do we dress up a problem? Substantiation. Another word for substantiation. I like that word because it's fancier. It makes me feel better about myself, right? Can anyone come up with a thesaurus? What other word would you use here? Substantiation. Starts with a C. Not that word. Why would you even think that? Context, right? Let's say that I'm driving home tonight and my car breaks down. Is that a problem? Sure, right? Sure it is. It is. You can't say it's not, right? But, it's 40 degrees outside. It's not as bad as if it was negative 20 outside, right? Or how about this? I'm driving home tonight after this thing. Or I'm driving to my own wedding. Which one's a bigger problem? Well, if it was my ex, I kind of wish I had that happen. That's beside the point. Okay, so substantiation is what makes the problem real, right? There's a corrupted database. Is that a problem? Sure it is. Is it real yet? No. Right? Okay, the database is corrupt and the website's losing records. Is it more real? Yeah, you got some more context, right? Some more substantiation. But let's make it even more real. Let's think about the person who you're describing the problem to. The database is corrupt, website's losing records, and we're losing customers. Okay, now that's a real problem. That's a problem that everybody worries about. You've understood it in the context of a business need. You're thinking on their level instead of trying to get them to think about your level. The solution. This is where the tools come in. We're actually all pretty good at solutions. We write them in our resume. Now, the problem is we write solutions and we never talk about what the problem is. If you tell somebody a solution, you think about it, they're coming to you, they're saying, well, I've got this business need, right? And I've put out a job description. Now I'm asking this person questions. A lot of times you get to an interview and they're asking you tons of questions and you think it's going well. It's probably not. It might be, but maybe they're trying to scratch an itch that they don't know you have. And they don't know they have, and you don't know they have. They're trying to figure out, well, you're telling me about all these things you did and how you did them, the tools you used to do them, but I don't know the solution yet. I've got a need, that's why I'm hiring somebody, right? If you talk about the problem first, they're more able to draw a parallelism between the thing that they're hiring for. Whereas if you talk about the solution, there's a million I could clone you. Let's say I clone you, right? I make this entire table is used. 5 clones of you. Now, everybody knows the rules of clone. What?
You want a deaf clone?
Well, okay, so that doesn't matter. But I'm going to clone you. I'm not going to change anything about you. Now, you will have to kill your clones because everybody knows the first rule of cloning is, it's not even illegal, right? You kill your clone, it's like, yeah, everybody understands that, right? There can only be one. And whichever one wins deserves to win,
Be each other or just the clone of myself?
But before we kill each other, right? Before you kill your clones, I'm going to ask you a problem. Here is a software engineering problem, right? I ask you an identical you times 4, right? For a solution to that problem. How many different solutions am I going to get? Probably 5, because you in your mind can think of multiple solutions to a problem, right? Solutions, it's kind of like a one-to-many relationship. So trying to figure out, when you just talk about your solutions in an interview or on your resume, I did these things, they have to decompile it into the problem and then compare it to their problem. Why not do that for them, right? So the first thing on your resume should be, on each experience should be, this is the problem that I was there to solve. This is the problem. You don't have to say this is the problem I was there to solve, but explain the problem in one sentence typically, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, a lot of people tell the middle of the story. They never finish it. There's a dragon terrorizing the village, right? Night kills the dragon. Is that a complete story? No, right? What about the princess? And there was a moment where they were looking in each other's eyes for a minute. It was I think there was something there, right? At the very least, you need to say they live happily ever after, right? You need to say what the results are. right? By the way, what's better than they live happily ever after? In terms of believability. Do you believe that they lived happily ever after? Well, let me ask you this. I make two statements. They live happily ever after, or after a short dating period, they got married, lived for 31 years, raised 4 children, and had 8 grandchildren at the time of their death. Which one do you believe more? The second one, right? Not just because people don't live forever, but also because I quantified it. That's why politicians just make up numbers. Did you know that 36% of statistics are made up on the spot? You're having trouble not believing it. You actually have to be like, no, gullible is not written on the ceiling, right? It is over there. I know. Go check. Somebody want to go check? That's right. But what I'm saying is, adding numbers makes things more real. Think about your resume. You know, I worked on a team. Is that a good statement? Yeah, sure it is. I worked on a team of 4, right? I can almost visualize you and the demographically similar people that run your team now, right? You can visualize it now, right? Okay. So problem, solution, results. Let's continue to expand on that a little bit, and let's actually look at what that might look like. So here is a typical, what I would recommend as a typical, what you would have on your resume, right? This is what you would normally see. Now, there is one little detail here that I sometimes talk about with students. Did you notice that I have title, comma, company? Do you know the word prescient, pertinent? Those are words, right? That you don't know the definition of. How about this? Let me ask you a question. If I asked you about your school experience, right? Let's ask you about your school experience. Okay. Name of the school. Sure, you.
Oh.
Name of the school.
Oh, okay. Charles Finney.
No, we're going to start. Oh, interesting. I don't live far from there, but I'm talking about here. Name of school.
RIT.
RIT. The year of expected graduation.
2025.
2025. Major.
Software engineering.
GPA. You can make something up if you want to.
3.8.
3.8. Okay. Location of the school.
What is this, like Henrietta or something?
Yeah. Probably say Rochester, right?
Right.
5 pieces of metadata, right? But I want to do this exercise again with you. I'm going to ask you about your schooling, but you can only say one of those. It's one and zit, none of the other ones. Which one's the one you're going to say?
RIT.
Anyone disagree?
I would say your major.
Yeah, software engineering. That's most prescient, right? You probably BS software engineering, right? Yeah. Actually, it's funny because we have an MSBS. I'm like, we put the BS in the MS. Never mind. Okay, so, by the way, has anyone here looked into the BS MBA crafted by yours truly? It's a great option. 4+1, get an MBA. Okay. So that's the same thing here. You've got the name of the company, the title you held, the location of the company, the date you worked there, all kinds of bull crap like that. But what do you start with? Which is the one in bold? The most prescient. Your title. Software engineer, comma, Google. Not Google, comma, software engineer. That's the wrong approach. Because you're going to be software engineer again. They're hiring a software engineer. That's nice, right? If you're like, hire me because I worked at Google, that's the wrong approach, right? It's just like saying, hire me because I went to RIT. It should be, better would be, hire me because I have a degree in software engineering, right? So we can kind of divide that up between these 3 things. I'm actually going to go through another example with you to kind of show you how this might work. And in fact, we're going to use one of our favorite pieces of experience that I would actually recommend you put on your resume, even though it kind of bothers you for me to say this, and that would be your 261 project. Anyone want to tell me why you wouldn't put it on your resume? Yeah.
Because
Ah, that's a good answer, right? I don't want to be like everybody else. I'm special. I mean, my mother called me the other day and told me that, right? What do you think?
You weren't like, compared to like a personal project where you let a person literally do it
Yeah.
as a job.
It's not a personal project, right? Now, there is a legit reason not to put it on there. You've got 3 co-ops, right? You know, but if you're going for your second co-op, it probably should be on there, right? But here's the thing. The fact that everybody else has it on their resume, imagine how refreshing it will be when they actually see it properly written on a resume. You know how many times they've heard web checkers or HealthNet? Like, they know it's something related to the game checkers, right? But, you know, I can almost guarantee you these employers have no idea what the hell this is, right? Why not be the person that tells them? You're the first person that came along that explained to them something that they've heard. It's like it's finally explaining what cloud means. If you're the person that comes along, you mention the word cloud, then explain it to in a way that they understand it. They're like, damn, this is the first person that came along. I actually know what cloud means now. By the way, anyone here know what cloud means? Yeah? What do you think?
It's a server that you're able to access
Mm-hmm.
on that another company hosts.
Oh, so we didn't have that before cloud?
It's that you're,
I mean, we had that in the 90s.
yeah, but the
But what,
they're able to efficiently run the data.
so we didn't have that in the 90s?
Not as well, and you didn't have to have it yourself.
Nobody can explain cloud. By the way, I can, actually, if you want me to. Anyone? This is a mini lesson outside of this lesson. I'll do it for you. If you really want to like blow people away with explaining cloud, I will tell you how to blow people away with explaining cloud. If you asked an engineer 15 years ago, what's the biggest problem you're facing right now? As an industry, as an individual. What job, if you can do it, could you write your own paycheck? Everybody would say, scaling. Scaling is such a huge pain in the right now. We cannot figure it out. Twitter launched and people can't get on Twitter. Twitter's so popular that we invented the fail whale for Twitter. That's literally where it came from. Now, if you had told me 15 years ago, by the way that we're going to fix scaling is to outsource it to Amazon, I would have been like, say what? Right? I would have said it just like that. So if you want to know what cloud is, outsource scaling. That's what it is. Servers aren't unique. Nothing about cloud is unique except outsource scaling. That's what's unique about it. You don't need to say, you get some server. Here's your server. Here's its specs. Or you tell us the specs, we'll build it. Now it's like, here's a spot that'll scale automatically and we'll just bill you for it. That's what cloud is. But let's come back to this. What I'm saying is HealthNet, web checkers, whatever the new one they're working on, explaining that in a prescient way is impressive. By the way, and you use this formula, that's how you do it. So here we go. Based on the amount of information, number of parties that hospitals must contend with, a system was needed. Here's how you know if you're properly describing a problem. It doesn't mention the solution. Let's do the problem for web checkers. What's the problem? I intentionally did HealthNet because that's the one that probably none of you did. Anyone do HealthNet? Any old persons here? They all graduated already, right? Tell me the problem statement for HealthNet. I'm sorry, for web checkers. Come on, somebody. Take a shot. I'm sorry I shot you down before with the cloud thing.
I want to play checkers with my friends.
Okay.
Competitively.
Okay. You're close. I would say if I had to describe it in one statement, it would be people want to play checkers remotely. Right? Just like this. Can you do that without your system? Can that problem be solved without your solution? Can people play checkers remotely without a web thing? I know it's so hard to imagine, but yes, they can. We have telephones, we have the postal service, right? My favorite solution would be you buy 50 boards, I buy 50 boards, and then I make the first move, encase it in clear resin, ship that to you, You look at that, make your second move, encase that in resin, ship that to me. Is computing more efficient than that? That's what we tell ourselves. I would tell you, I've seen some of your code, that resin solution might actually be better than what you've come up with. And that's what's interesting about that. That's the middle part, right? We shake in some action words. You want to see that again? We shake in some action. Whoops. I'll do that again. We shake in some action words, right? These are all the words that we see on all the resume tips and tricks, right? ED words. Created whatever, right? And then, you know what? This is the part I think most of you already understand, or you know how to use. But let's not forget this. Remember how I mentioned I told you I had a solution for the skills problem? Here it is. Write tools, and just list them. Don't try to inject them in other places. Just put them here. Because think about the perspective. You're not saying maybe the IT approach. Oh, I'm a Oracle certified DBA, right? Here's all the examples of the Oracle certified DBAing. And who here wants to be an IT person? Ever meet an angry person? They're probably in IT, right? But, and guess what that person's going to be hired to do? What they're going to be doing all day? Oracle certified DBAing. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. We need that. We need factory workers, right? But the problem with putting the tools first, thinking about the skills first, and then talking about the experience of that, is you're putting the cart before the horse. Let me ask you a question. I'm going to illustrate this again for you. We got a list here. What's more important to this project? Python or HTML? Okay. Python or Trello? Git or Trello? What do you think? Who here says Git? Who here says Trello? Who here wants another option? Let me ask you a parallel question. What's more important to building a house, a hammer or a saw? Who here says hammer? Who here says saw? Who here says, what a stupid question? Because you can't saw with a hammer. You can't hammer with a saw. I mean, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it, right? They're tools. Why are we debating this, right? If you don't have a hammer, don't start the job, right? Same thing here. As soon as we start to put some tools above other tools, like, oh yeah, Git is so much better, or this is, C++ is so much more important than Trello. Yeah, try doing a project without a project management system. Try doing it without Slack, right? It's just like the hammer and the saw. They're both tools. So just list them. Free yourself, right? Okay, finally. Results and quantification. So it's interesting, if you actually think about your project, you might have trouble quantifying web checkers. I've just quantified 2 things for you that are actually maybe the most realistic elements that you've ever seen in a project. Your CS projects don't have that, right? Most of your projects don't have this, but I guarantee you, almost every project you work on in industry, you're going to have both of those things, right? 2 numbers. That's our results. What are some other numbers? Can anyone give me other numbers related to your 261 project? Give me some other numbers. We'd all love to have sexy numbers. Yeah, saved the company $3 billion. No big deal, really. Humble brag. We don't have that. We got this. This is a believable statement, isn't it? There's at least one more number you should be thinking of, though. What is it? There's one big one. Think about the late project stuff. Think about the verification stage. Yep. Not quite. How do you know? How do you know if your project's any good?
Test it.
That's right. How many test cases did you write for that? Probably more than you've written since, right? Testing is one of those things that's impressive to everybody. We all think that we should do more testing. Someone will hire you because you did testing. They think sprinkling you You're one intern. They have 100 engineers. They think sprinkling you in there is somehow going to change their lack of testing. It's a weird bias that we have, right? I'm going to hire this person because they do the thing that I suck at. I'm sure they'll completely change the culture around here in the 3 months they're here. I don't know, right? There we go. There's our posting, right? That's a pretty good posting. Makes HealthNet or web checkers look pretty good. A lot better than you probably have it, right? Now I'm going to make one more case for this thing on the right here, on the left here, I'm sorry. For this idea of going through this sequence. What is the most difficult nightmare fuelish type question that an employer can ask you in an interview? The most nightmare fuelish type question. Like, just horrible question that you don't want to get in an interview.
So, like, why do you want this job?
Okay. Can anyone think of anything worse? Let's find something worse. Yeah.
Tell me about yourself.
Okay, worse than that. Let's make that worse. We can turn that just a little bit worse.
What's your biggest weakness?
Yeah. Tell me about yourself, but negative, right? Any other questions that make you sweat? What do you think?
Why should I hire you?
Okay.
How much should I pay you?
Okay. Those actually are all I can all give you quantifiable answers for those.
How did you get in here?
Who are you and why haven't I called security yet, right? The other one that I hear a lot is some technical question you don't know the answer to. What's a design pattern? You're like, I didn't even know that was a word, right? You know, what's interesting is both of those questions are one and the same. Someone asking you about your weaknesses or about a time you screwed up, to reveal myself. Oh, I'm hideous. Don't look at me, right? That's a problem, isn't it? Hey, what's wrong with you? I've just presented you with a problem, haven't I? Or, hey, what's a design pattern? You have no idea what that is. By the way, if you know the thing, say it. If they really want to know your technical proficiency, they're not going to ask you in an interview. They're going to do a coding challenge or something like that, right? They're asking you because they don't want you to not know the answer sometimes, right? You can tell a difference usually. But you know what? This helps you. You know what? You're asking me about my flaws? I used to have a problem with organization. Negative. You've seen my inner underbelly. I used to have a problem with organization. But we're not going to stop there, are we? I've been working on that. I've been using the calendar app on my phone. It's always with me. Might as well use it, right? And here have been the positive outcomes. I've been making meetings on time. My team members have seen notable improvement. My life's been better. That's a great story. They took something where they're asking you for your biggest flaw, and you turned it into a story of victory, right? I don't know what the design pattern is. Negative. Idiot. It sounds kind of like this other thing. I don't know if it's like that, but you know what? I know where to find design patterns. Here's the information sources that I would seek, and here's what I'd expect to find. Right? This is the formula. You remember this formula? Those 6 words in that order? You'll nail it. Because everybody else is, I don't know. The thing, right? Actually, by the way, if you want the best possible answer for what's your biggest weakness, I'll give you a perfect scenario answer, if you'd like. Does anybody here know what an embossed card is? Think wedding invitations, where it's like printed, like raised, like super fancy type stuff, right? You find out the name of the person who's interviewing you, right? Joe. And you have in the nicest calligraphy, right on that embossed card, Joe. Sometimes I over-prepare for things. You put that in your card, in your pocket, I'm sorry. And when they say, what's your biggest weakness? You simply take the card out and hand it to them. Drop the mic. Let me do that. No, I'm just kidding. But if failing that, maybe you should use this. By the way, if you can, I've actually come up with some interesting ideas. You know what my favorite response should be? What the best response possible should be to, can you hand me your resume? You know what the answer is? Light mode or dark mode, and you have one of each. Imagine that. Somebody has a dark mode resume for you. That would just you win the interview. I actually have had students. I came up with that idea a few years ago, and I've actually had students create them. I don't know. Dark mode's crap. Let's face it. Who here thinks dark mode is crap? Who here thinks light mode is crap because your parents like it? Oh, I came with a real reason. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, you know what my theory is? Dark mode actually existed in the 90s when CRTs had reached their pinnacle. And then we got these crappy flat panel displays that didn't do dark mode so good. Now we got good IPS displays. Now we have good OLED displays, and we can do dark mode again. Like, dark mode on a display of 10 years ago looked like garbage. And so now we can do it again. And then your kids will be like, dark mode, ugh, that's disgusting. Also, skinny jeans, disgusting. Those are mom jeans, which is what I called them. Okay? Okay. Sorry. Enough ranting about you being young and such. By the way, some of you are getting a bit old. Any seniors here? You're getting a bit old. Could you please leave and replace yourself with an 18-year-old? Maybe around May, over the summer. Okay, perfect. It makes me feel young because all of you are young. Okay, any questions? What do you think? How many people here feel like they have some changes that they can make to their resume, to their life? By the way, you want a great set of see these words? You want a great set of words? If you want to sound really engineering, who here wants to sound more engineering? Okay. Analyzed, designed, implemented, verified, released. Don't I sound like an engineer? You could use other words for all those, but those are some engineering type words, right? Okay. Now, what I can do now, basically the presentation's over. You could probably stop the stream if you want. Did we get any? Oh, I forgot to mention. This is brought to you by NordVPN. I'm just kidding.